The Inquisitor's Trial. Chapter 1, Seeds of Doubt. Pale, sickly daylight filtered through the dusty air of Inquisitor Alaric Voss's chamber. His study in the northern tower of the Sanctus Administratum resided in Tertius VI, the heart of Imperial bureaucracy on Ophelia VII. Voss stood by the narrow window, his gaunt silhouette stark against the dim light. At 43 standard Terran years, his face already bore the deep lines of someone who had witnessed too much. The signature inquisitorial rosette gleamed on his chest, its polished silver contrasting with his austere black uniform. His augmetic right eye whirred softly as it adjusted focus, scanning the data slate in his hand for the third time. The report from his acolyte, interrogator Lysandra Graves, contained information that troubled him deeply. 3 cardinals found with the same mark, he murmured to himself, all within the Helix sector, all within 6 months. The mark was a subtle one, easily dismissed as a birthmark by the untrained eye. But to Voss, the 8-pointed asterisk, with its slightly elongated southeastern point, was unmistakable, a variant of the mark of Tzeentch, chaos god of change and manipulation. That such a mark had been found on high-ranking members of the ecclesiarchy was beyond concerning. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," Voss commanded, his voice carrying the authority that came with his office. The door creaked open to reveal a tall woman in her early 30s, interrogator Lysandra Graves's. Dark hair was pulled back severely from her face, and her expression betrayed nothing. Like Voss, she wore the black uniform of the Ordo Hereticus, though her rank insignia marked her as his subordinate. "The transport is ready, Inquisitor," she reported. "We can depart for Cardinal Thorn's estate within the hour." Voss nodded. "Good, and what of the Cardinal's staff?" "They've been informed of our arrival. The official reason remains inspection of archival procedures." And unofficially, a ghost of a smile crossed Lysandra's face. "No one asks unofficial questions of the Inquisition, my lord." "As it should be." Voss placed the data slate down on his desk, among the stacks of ancient texts and scrolls. "Have you compiled the dossier on Thorn's associates?" "Yes, my lord. The most interesting connection is his frequent meetings with Lord Commander Militant Axelrod of the Astra Militarum." Voss's organic eye narrowed. "Axelrod commands the 84th Ophidian Regiment, does he not? Currently deployed to suppress heretical uprisings in the Helix sector." "The very same," Lysandra confirmed. "The regiment that has reported suspiciously few casualties, despite the intensity of the conflict." "Interesting indeed." Voss reached for his bolt pistol, checking its chamber before holstering it beneath his long coat. "We'll need to tread carefully, Lysandra, if the taint has spread from the ecclesiarchy to the militarum." He left the thought unfinished, but both knew the implications. Corruption at such high levels could signal the beginnings of a sector-wide heresy, the kind that had torn star systems apart throughout Imperial history. "There's one more thing, my lord," Lysandra said, hesitating slightly. "A message arrived from Inquisitor Lord Havelock." Voss stiffened. Maximilian Havelock was his mentor and one of the most respected members of the Ordo Hereticus. A message from him was never trivial. "What does it say?" "Only that we are to proceed with the utmost caution and report directly to him, bypassing the usual channels." Voss felt the first stirrings of unease. Bypassing channels meant Havelock suspected infiltration within the Inquisition itself. "Very well," he said finally. "Let's not keep the Cardinal waiting. The Emperor protects, Lysandra." "The Emperor protects," she echoed, and Voss couldn't help but notice the slight tremor in her voice. As they left the chamber, neither noticed the servoskull hovering in the shadowed corner, its augur array recording their every word. Cardinal Thorn's estate sprawled across the upper plateau of Tertius VI, its Gothic spires reaching toward the perpetually clouded sky. Gargoyles fashioned after Imperial saints glared down at Voss and Lysandra as their armored rhino transport passed through the ornate gates. "Quite the display of piety," Lysandra remarked dryly. "The loudest declarations of faith often mask the deepest heresies," Voss replied, his augmetic eye scanning the grounds. "There are 13 servitors on patrol, more than standard for an ecclesiarchal estate. Expecting trouble, perhaps, or hiding something." The rhino came to a halt before a grand staircase. A procession of robed acolytes descended, led by a tall, regal figure in the ornate crimson vestments of a cardinal. Aurelius Thorn had the bearing of nobility, his silver hair and neatly trimmed beard framing a face that projected benevolence and wisdom. Only Voss's trained eye caught the calculating coldness behind the cardinal's smile. "Inquisitor Voss," Thorn greeted with a bow that was precisely the correct depth to acknowledge Voss's authority while maintaining his own dignity. "What an unexpected honor. I was told only that the Ordo Hereticus wished to inspect our archival procedures." "The Inquisition's interests are varied and complex, Cardinal," Voss replied smoothly. "I find it best to oversee certain matters personally." Of course. The Emperor's work requires diligence at all levels." Thorn gestured toward the main doors. "Please allow me to show you to our scriptorum. Our archives date back to the founding of this diocese, some 4 millennia ago." As they ascended the stairs, Voss noted the subtle hand signals exchanged between Thorn's acolytes and the estate's guards. Standard Imperial security protocols, but executed with a precision that suggested military training rather than typical ecclesiarchal discipline. The interior of the estate was even more lavish than its exterior suggested. Gold leaf adorned the vaulted ceilings, and priceless artifacts from across the sector lined the hallways. Relics of supposed saints were displayed in crystal cases, while tapestries depicting the Emperor's Great Crusade hung between marble columns. "Your collection is most impressive," Voss commented. "The ecclesiarchy must value your service." "Greatly. The Emperor rewards faithful service," Thorn replied smoothly. "These treasures belong to the Imperial creed, not to me personally. I am merely their custodian." A practiced response, Voss thought. Too practiced. They were led into a vast chamber where dozens of robed scribes worked silently at ancient wooden desks, copying texts and filing documents into ornate cabinets. The air was heavy with the scent of incense and parchment. "Our scriptorum," Thorn announced with evident pride. "Every sermon delivered in the diocese, every liturgical variation, every baptismal and funerary record, all preserved for posterity and imperial scrutiny." Voss nodded appreciatively, while his augmetic eye recorded everything. "Most impressive. I'd like to begin with your personal correspondences over the past year, Cardinal." A flicker of annoyance crossed Thorn's face before his diplomatic smile reasserted itself. "My personal correspondences? Surely the Administratum archives would be more." "Cardinal," Voss interrupted gently, "you misunderstand. This is not a request." The tension in the room thickened palpably. The scribes had stopped their work, heads bowed but clearly listening. After a moment, Thorn nodded to an elderly scribe who hurried to a locked cabinet at the far end of the room. "Of course, Inquisitor, the ecclesiarchy has nothing to hide from the holy ordos." "I'm pleased to hear it," Voss said. "Interrogator Graves will oversee the document review. Meanwhile, I would value a private word with you, Cardinal." Thorn's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened slightly. "As you wish. My private study is nearby." As Lysandra moved toward the archives with a team of inquisitorial scribes who had entered behind them, Voss followed Thorn down a side corridor. He caught Lysandra's eye before they parted. Silent reminder to be vigilant. The cardinal's study was smaller than expected, an intimate space with walls lined with leather. Bound books. A large aquila dominated one wall, expertly carved from what appeared to be Terran. Mahogany. A cognitor unit hummed softly in one corner. Some aged Macrag wine, perhaps, Thorn offered, gesturing to a crystal decanter. I prefer clarity of mind during an investigation, Voss declined politely. As you wish. Thorn seated himself behind an ornate desk and steepled his fingers. How may I assist the holy ordos? Voss remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back. I'll be direct, Cardinal. Your name has arisen in connection with certain irregularities. Irregularities? Thorn raised an eyebrow. Of what nature? 3 cardinals from neighboring systems have been found dead in recent months. Each bore a mark that our order finds concerning. Voss watched carefully for any reaction, but Thorn's expression remained impassive. A tragedy, the cardinal said smoothly, but I fail to see how this concerns me. All 3 were known associates of yours. All attended the Synod of Helix last year, which you chaired. Inquisitor, I chair many synods and have countless associates within the ecclesiarchy. Correlation is not causation, as the Mechanicus are fond of saying. Indeed. Voss paced slowly around the room, his augmetic eye scanning the bookshelves. Tell me about your relationship with Lord Commander Militant Axelrod. This time there was a reaction, subtle but unmistakable. A slight tensing of the shoulders. A momentary pause before responding. Bastion Axelrod, we serve on several committees together, addressing the spiritual welfare of troops in this sector. A devoted servant of the Emperor. And your meetings with him, bi-weekly, I understand, address only spiritual matters. Thorn's eyes narrowed slightly. The division between spiritual and military matters is not always clear-cut, Inquisitor. The 84th Ophidian faces heretical cults that blaspheme against the Imperial creed. My guidance on recognizing such heresy is valuable to military operations. Of course, Voss conceded. He stopped at a shelf containing ancient texts, his finger running along the spine of one particular tome, the Codex Demonicum, unusual reading for a cardinal. Know thy enemy, Inquisitor, Thorn replied smoothly. That copy was sanctioned by Inquisitor Lord Torquemada himself, with appropriate redactions. Would you deny me the knowledge to identify the very heresies I am tasked with combating? Voss turned to face the cardinal directly. I deny nothing yet, Your Eminence. I merely collect facts. Before Thorn could respond, the door burst open. Lysandra stood in the doorway, her bolt pistol drawn but held at her side, a clear warning without direct threat. My lord, she addressed Voss, we found something you should see immediately. The tension between them was palpable. For a moment, Voss thought Thorn might object, but the cardinal merely smiled thinly. By all means, Inquisitor. The Emperor's work must proceed. As Voss followed Lysandra back toward the scriptorum, she spoke in a hushed tone. The correspondences were too perfect, immaculately maintained and suspiciously free of anything compromising. A careful man, Voss mused. Too careful, but one of the scribes, a young novice, approached me while pretending to stumble. She passed me this. Lysandra produced a tiny data crystal from her sleeve. Said it was hidden in a false compartment beneath the cardinal's personal prayer book. Voss took the crystal, concealing it within his palm. Interesting. And the novice disappeared back among the other scribes before I could question her further. We'll need to extract her before. A sudden commotion from the scriptorum interrupted him. Shouts echoed down the hallway, followed by the unmistakable sound of a bolt pistol discharge. Thrown, Lysandra swore, drawing her weapon fully now. They rushed toward the noise, only to be met by one of their inquisitorial scribes, blood streaming from a wound in his shoulder. Ambush, he gasped. The cardinal's guards, killed Scribe Heron when he found something in the archives, trying to destroy evidence. Voss drew his bolt pistol. Alert our driver. Get the rhino ready for immediate extraction. The wounded scribe nodded weakly and staggered toward the entrance while Voss and Lysandra advanced cautiously toward the scriptorium. The sounds of struggle had ceased, replaced by an ominous silence. "Something's wrong," Lysandra whispered. "That was too brief for a real firefight." Voss nodded grimly. "Be ready for anything." They rounded the corner into the scriptorium to find a scene of calculated devastation. Several of the wooden desks had been overturned and papers were scattered across the floor. 2 bodies lay in pools of blood, one of their inquisitorial scribes and one of Thorn's guards. The other scribes cowered against the walls, and in the center of the room stood Cardinal Thorn, surrounded by 4 guards with bolters, trained on the entrance. "Inquisitor Voss," Thorn said coldly, all pretense of deference gone from his voice. "I'm afraid I must report an unfortunate incident. Your scribe attacked one of my guards when asked to return a confidential document. The guard acted in self-defense." Voss's augmetic eye whirred as it assessed the scene. The angle of the blood spatter, the positioning of the bodies, it told a different story than Thorn's. "A convenient explanation, Cardinal," Voss replied, his bolt pistol held steady at his side. "But forensic evidence will reveal the truth." "Forensics," Thorn laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "My dear Inquisitor, there will be no investigation. You seem to misunderstand your position." The Cardinal reached into his robes and produced not a weapon, but a scroll bearing the seal of the High Lords of Terra. "By the authority of the Adeptus Terra, I am empowered to oversee all Imperial activities in this sector, including those of the Inquisition. Your investigation ends now." Voss's organic eye narrowed. "The Inquisition answers only to the Emperor, Cardinal." "And yet," Thorn smiled thinly, "the practical mechanics of Imperial governance require cooperation between the Ordos and the other Imperial institutions. Would you defy the seal of the High Lords themselves?" It was a trap, Voss realized. If he backed down, vital evidence would be lost. If he persisted, Thorn would claim inquisitorial overreach, a political maneuver that could hamstring the investigation for years. "Unless you seem remarkably prepared for this confrontation, Cardinal," Voss observed calmly, "almost as if you expected us." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Thorn's face. "The ecclesiarchy is always prepared for official inspections. Yet your guards carry military-grade bolters, not the ceremonial weapons typical of ecclesiarchal security," Voss noted, "and they employ militarum hand signals, curious preparations for an archive inspection." The 4 guards tensed, fingers tightening on triggers. Voss knew he and Lysandra were outgunned, but he pressed on. "I wonder what Lord Commander Axelrod would say if questioned about lending his troops to ecclesiarchal security duties. Such a breach of protocol might interest the commissariat." Thorn's confident expression wavered. "You're reaching, Inquisitor, making desperate accusations to justify your intrusion." "Am I?" Voss took a calculated risk. "Then you won't mind if we take the young novice who passed information to my interrogator into protective custody." The reaction was immediate. One of the guards involuntarily glanced toward a trembling figure among the cowering scribes. A young woman, no more than 20, her face pale with terror. "No one leaves until I've reviewed what transpired here," Thorn declared, his voice hardening. "Cardinal," Voss said quietly, "preventing an inquisitorial witness from testifying is obstructing an Imperial investigation, a capital offense, even for one of your rank." The standoff stretched for several seconds. Then Thorn's shoulders relaxed slightly, and he adopted a conciliatory tone. "Perhaps I've been hasty, Inquisitor. The death of your scribe is regrettable, and tensions are running high. I suggest we all take a moment to reflect on our duties to the Emperor. Voss recognized the tactical retreat. A wise suggestion, Cardinal. My team will withdraw with our fallen and the novice witness. We can continue our discussion of archival practices another day. The novice remains, Thorn countered. She has taken vows to the ecclesiarchy, and the Inquisition supersedes those vows when heresy is suspected. Voss replied firmly. She comes with us, Cardinal. Their eyes locked in silent battle. Finally, Thorn nodded curtly. Take her, but this matter is far from resolved, Inquisitor Voss. On that, Voss agreed. We are in complete accord. Chapter II. Whispers in the Dark. The inquisitorial safe house was located in the mid-levels of Tethys Hive, disguised as an unassuming merchant guild office. Its true nature was known only to a handful of trusted agents. Inside, the walls were lined with wards against psychic intrusion, and the most sophisticated Vox scramblers available to the Ordo Hereticus ensured their communications remained private. Voss stood at the window, watching the endless stream of cargo haulers and personnel carriers flowing through the hive's main arterial. His reflection in the glass looked haggard. It had been 18 hours since their confrontation with Cardinal Thorn, and he had not yet rested. Behind him, Lysandra was gently questioning the novice they had extracted from the Cardinal's estate. The young woman's sister Ilara, she had called herself, sat hunched over a mug of recaf, her ecclesiarchal robes exchanged for plain civilian attire. Start from the beginning, Lysandra prompted. When did you first notice something wrong in the Cardinal's household? Ilara's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her mug. 3 months ago, I was assigned to transcribe the Cardinal's personal journals as part of my scribal training. Most of it was ordinary sermon notes, administrative decisions, theological musings. But then I found entries written in a cipher. You can decrypt ciphers? Voss asked, turning from the window. I was raised in the Scalem orphanage on Helios Prime, Ilara explained. One of the tutors. There was formerly of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. She taught some of us cryptography, said it. Might earn us better positions in the administratum someday. Voss and Lysandra exchanged glances. Such education was unusual for orphans destined for menial roles. Continue, Lysandra encouraged. The cipher wasn't complex, a simple substitution with astronomical symbols. Within it, the Cardinal detailed meetings that never appeared in his official schedule. Meetings with military officers, rogue traders even, she hesitated. Even someone he referred to only as the Magos. With the Azure Mechadendrites. Voss's augmetic eye word as he processed this information. Azure Mechadendrites are non-standard. The Mechanicus uses red, black, or brass coloration following standard STC templates. Could be a personal modification, Lysandra suggested. Or, Voss said gravely, a sign of tech heresy. The followers of the Logician sect sometimes use blue coloration to symbolize their deviation from Mechanicus orthodoxy. He turned back to Ilara. What else did you find? Maps, the young woman replied. Star charts with certain systems marked with the same 8-pointed symbol you mentioned finding on the dead cardinals. Did you recognize any of the marked systems? One was Helios Prime, my homeworld. Ilara's voice cracked slightly. Another was Ophelia VII. Where we are now, the others I didn't recognize except, she hesitated again. Except, Voss prompted. One was labeled Primary Nexus in the Cardinal's cipher. It was a star system with a red giant and 9 planets. The 4th planet was marked with a larger version of the symbol. Voss felt a chill run through him. Did this chart have coordinates? Ilara nodded. Yes. I memorized them because they seemed important. The sector designation was Scaris, coordinates 4765.039, 1.19. Lysandra's eyes widened slightly. That's within the Helix sector. Not just within it, Voss said grimly. That's Sentinel Prime, headquarters of the 84th Ophidian Regiment under Lord Commander Axelrod. There's one more thing, Alara added, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. 2 days ago I overheard the Cardinal speaking with a visitor in his private chapel. The visitor's voice was strange, modulated like it came through some kind of device. They spoke of the ascension and the coming change. The Cardinal said, "The architect of fate will be pleased with our preparations." Voss felt his blood run cold. The architect of fate was one of the many titles of Tzinch, the chaos god of change and manipulation. "Sister Alara," he said solemnly, "you've shown great courage in bringing this information forward. The risk you've taken." A thunderous explosion cut him off, shaking the entire building. Alarms blared throughout the safe house. "Breach in the lower levels," shouted one of Voss's acolytes as he burst into the room. "Multiple hostiles advancing up the central shaft." "How were we found?" Lysandra demanded, drawing her bolt pistol. "Questions later," Voss ordered, moving to a wall panel that concealed an arsenal of weapons. He tossed Lysandra a combat shotgun and grabbed a plasma pistol for himself. "Secure the witness and prepare for evacuation." The building shook again as another explosion rocked the foundation. The lights flickered. Ominously, "Lysandra, take Sister Alara to extraction point Epsilon. Use the maintenance tunnels," Voss commanded. "I'll hold them here and join you when I can." "My lord," Lysandra protested, "protocol dictates." "Protocol be damned," Voss snapped. "The information she carries is vital. If it's true, we're facing a sector-wide conspiracy with tentacles reaching into the highest levels of Imperial governance. She must reach Inquisitor Lord Havelock." A series of sharp reports echoed up the stairwell, bolter fire, followed by the screams of dying acolytes. "Go," Voss ordered. "Emperor protect you both." Lysandra hesitated only a moment longer before nodding grimly. "Emperor protect you, my lord." As she led the terrified novice toward the hidden exit at the rear of the safe house, Voss turned to the remaining acolytes, 3 trained operatives, loyal but woefully outnumbered against whatever force had found them. "Defensive positions," he ordered calmly. "Conserve ammunition and aim for kill shots. We need to buy them time." The acolytes moved with practiced efficiency, overturning furniture to create crude barricades. One laid frag traps along the stairwell, while another set up a heavy stubber covering the main approach. Voss touched the rosette on his chest, activating its embedded vox. "This is Inquisitor Alaric Voss. Authorization code Hereticus Omega 79 Epsilon. Safe house compromised. Requesting immediate reinforcement from any available inquisitorial assets." The response was nothing but static. "Vox jammers," one of the acolytes reported grimly. "Sophisticated ones." "Military grade," Voss agreed. "Or better." The heavy stubber opened fire as the first attackers appeared in the stairwell. Voss caught glimpses of carapace armor painted in deep crimson, not the black of ecclesiarchal guards or the green of the 84th Ophidian. These were different troops entirely. "Crimson specialists," the stubber operator called out between bursts. "Lord Commander Axelrod's personal guard unit." The revelation confirmed Voss's suspicions about the military connection, but raised new questions. How had Axelrod's forces located them so quickly? And why send his elite troops rather than standard militarum units? The firefight intensified. Frag grenades detonated in the stairwell, briefly halting the advance, but Voss could hear the attackers regrouping. They were well trained, using suppressing fire to pin down the defenders while others moved into flanking positions. One of the acolytes cried out as a bolt round caught him in the shoulder, tearing through flesh and Bone. Voss dragged him behind cover, applying a quick field dressing to the wound. "My lord," the wounded man gasped, "there are too many. You should go while you can." "The Inquisition does not abandon its own," Voss replied firmly, though he knew their situation was dire. A new sound cut through the gunfire, a low, rhythmic chanting in a language that hurt the ears, and raised the hairs on the back of Voss's neck. One of the attackers was reciting something in an ancient tongue. "Cover your ears," Voss shouted, recognizing the cadence of a sorceress incantation. Too late. A wave of psychic energy surged up the stairwell, manifesting as crackling blue lightning that arced from metal to metal. The heavy stubber exploded, killing its operator instantly. The other acolyte screamed as the lightning found the metal components of his flak armor, burning through to the flesh beneath. Voss raised his plasma pistol as a figure emerged through the smoke and debris. It wore the crimson armor of Axelrod specialists, but its movements were wrong, too fluid, almost serpentine. Its helmet visor glowed with an unnatural blue light. "Inquisitor Voss," the figure spoke, its voice distorted and layered as if multiple entities spoke as one. "The Cardinal sends his regards." Voss fired his plasma pistol. The superheated burst struck the figure square in the chest, melting through its carapace armor, but the creature didn't fall. Instead, the molten metal of its armor flowed and reshaped itself, the wound closing before Voss's eyes. "The Cardinal thought you might discover his plans," the creature continued, advancing slowly. "But it matters not. The wheels are in motion. The change comes to this sector, and not even the Ordos can stop the turning of fate's wheel." Voss backed up slowly, firing again. This time he aimed for the head, and the plasma bolt seared through the creature's helmet. For a moment he glimpsed what lay beneath, not a human face, but a mass of writhing, iridescent flesh with too many eyes. A Tzynkian demon, bound to human form. The realization struck Voss with paralyzing clarity. This was no mere heresy or cult uprising. If demons were already manifesting in physical form, the barrier between real space and the warp was dangerously thin in this sector. The creature laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Your comprehension dawns too late, Inquisitor. The Cardinal's ascension approaches. Sentinel Prime will be the nexus, and from there the chain will spread across the segmentum." More possessed troops were emerging from the stairwell, their movements jerky and unnatural. Voss knew he couldn't defeat them all. His priority now was escaping to warn the Ordo. He triggered the emergency rune on his rosette, a last resort that would activate the safe house's self-destruct protocol. "The Emperor's justice comes for all heretics," Voss declared, backing toward a concealed door behind the tactical display. "Even those who hide behind the stolen flesh of Imperial soldiers." "The Emperor," the demon thing mocked, "a corpse god rotting on his golden throne. He cannot save you from what comes, Inquisitor." Voss reached the hidden door and slipped through it into a narrow maintenance passage. Behind him, the possessed troops began to pursue, but they were slowed by the confines of the passage. He had 5 minutes before the safe house's plasma core overloaded. Voss ran through the labyrinthine maintenance tunnels, hearing the inhuman screeches of his pursuers growing more distant. The tunnels would lead him to a secondary extraction point where, if the Emperor was merciful, transport might still be waiting. But as he rounded a corner, he found his path blocked. A figure in the crimson armor of Axelrod's specialist stood before him, helmet removed to reveal a face he recognized. "Lysandra," Voss breathed in disbelief. His interrogator's expression was cold, devoid of the loyalty and dedication he had known for years. "My lord," she said, her voice flat, "you should have remained in the safe house. It would have been a quicker death." Voss raised his plasma pistol but hesitated, a fatal mistake. Lysandra's bolt pistol barked once, and he felt the round pierce his abdomen, tearing through organs before detonating inside him. He collapsed against the tunnel wall, blood pouring from the grievous wound. "Why?" he managed to gasp. Lysandra knelt beside him, her face coming into focus as his vision blurred with pain and approaching death. "The architect of fate showed me truths you could never understand, my lord. The Imperium is dying, has been dying for millennia. The change offers the only salvation." And Sister Alaric Voss coughed, blood speckling his lips. "A necessary sacrifice," Lysandra replied coldly, "as are you." With tremendous effort, Voss raised his arm and pressed his rosette to Lysandra's armor. "May the Emperor forgive you," he whispered, "for I cannot." He triggered the rosette's final protocol, a localized melta-charge designed to destroy sensitive, inquisitorial equipment upon the bearer's death. At such close range, the thermal blast would vaporize them both. Lysandra's eyes widened in realization, but it was too late. The rosette's machine spirit sensed Voss's fading life signs and activated. Inquisitor Alaric Voss's last thought was a prayer that his death would buy time for others to uncover the truth, that somewhere the warning would reach those who could stop what was coming. In the white-hot flash of the melta charge, he thought he heard the Emperor's voice calling him home. Chapter III. Echoes of Betrayal. 3 weeks after the destruction of the Tethys Hive's safe house, an unmarked shuttle docked at Orbital Station Helix IV. Its transponder codes identified it as a routine administratum census vessel, and the station's security protocols processed it without special attention. From the shuttle emerged a tall, broad-shouldered man in the plain gray uniform of an administratum adept. His face was forgettable, neither handsome nor ugly, with no distinguishing features that would linger in memory. Only his eyes, one organic and one augmetic, might have given him away to a careful observer. Inquisitor Lord Maximilian Havelock had not survived 6 decades in the Ordo Hereticus without mastering the art of anonymity. Today, he moved through the crowded orbital station like a ghost, unnoticed and unremarkable. The loss of Alaric Voss had been a blow, personally and operationally. Voss had been one of his most promising proteges, a man of both intelligence and moral clarity. But his death had not been in vain. The final data burst from Voss's rosette had reached Havelock's ship, carrying fragments of information recovered from the safe house, coordinates, names, and most critically, confirmation of demonic presence. Now Havelock was operating alone, trusting no one. If Voss's own interrogator had been corrupted, no one could be above suspicion. He made his way to a public data terminal and inserted a nondescript data slate. To any observer, he appeared to be checking routine administrative reports. In reality, he was accessing sealed, inquisitorial records through a series of encrypted back channels. The information scrolling before him painted a disturbing picture. The 84th Ophidian Regiment's casualty reports showed impossibly low numbers, given the intensity of the fighting in the Helix sector. Supply requisitions included unusual items, rare minerals associated with warp-attuned technologies, quantities of psychoactive compounds ostensibly for medicinal purposes, and arcane texts requisitioned from restricted sections of various planetary libraries. More concerning were the troop movements. The 84th Ophidian had been systematically withdrawing from strategic locations throughout the sector, consolidating their forces around Sentinel Prime, the system Voss had identified as the primary nexus in Cardinal Thorn's star. Jarts, Havelock's augmetic eye whirred softly as he downloaded the data and purged the terminal's memory. As he stood to leave, he noticed a maintenance servitor watching him from across the concourse. Its movements seemed too deliberate, its augmetic eye focusing on him with unusual intensity. Havelock casually adjusted his route, moving into a more crowded section of the station. The servitor altered its path accordingly, maintaining its surveillance. Not a servitor, then. Something using a servitor's shell as camouflage. Havelock entered a busy trading hall where merchants from across the sector haggled over goods and shipping contracts. The noise and crowd would make it difficult for his pursuer to track him. Without revealing itself, he circled through the throng, eventually doubling back to observe the entrance from behind a large cargo container. The servitor entered moments later, its head swiveling mechanically as it scanned the crowd. When its augmetic eye passed over Havelock's position, it paused momentarily, then continued scanning, as if it hadn't seen him. A clever ruse, but not clever enough. Havelock slipped away through a service corridor, making his way toward the station's lower levels, where he had arranged to meet an informant, the only lead he had to the conspiracy that had claimed Voss's life. The meeting point was a disused maintenance bay in the station's outer ring. Havelock arrived early, checking the area for surveillance devices and potential ambush points. Satisfied that the location was secure, he settled in to wait. 20 minutes later, a slight figure in a dock worker's coveralls entered the bay. The hood of the coveralls was pulled low, obscuring the person's face until they drew closer. Inquisitor Lord Havelock. The voice was young, female, and trembling with fear. "I use that name only among trusted associates," Havelock replied cautiously, "and trust is in short supply these days." The figure pushed back her hood, revealing the face of a young woman barely into adulthood. "I was Sister Ilara of Cardinal Thorn's household." Havelock's interest sharpened. According to the fragments of data from Voss's rosette, Sister Ilara had been a key witness, supposedly taken to safety by interrogator Lysandra Graves before Voss's last stand. "Interrogator Graves reported you dead," Havelock said flatly. "She tried to make it so," Ilara replied, her hand unconsciously rising to a partially healed scar on her throat. "When we left the safe house, she took me through the maintenance tunnels as Inquisitor Voss had ordered, but instead of heading to the extraction point, she led me to an abandoned processing chamber. She changed. Her eyes turned blue and her voice became wronged. Possession," Havelock noted grimly. Ilara nodded. "She said I had served my purpose by leading them to the Inquisitor, but that loose ends needed to be severed. She slit my throat and left me to bleed out." The young woman's voice was remarkably steady as she recounted her near death. "But the Emperor had other plans. Maintenance worker found me in time, took me to a medici who asked no questions. And you survived to seek me out," Havelock finished. "How did you find me?" "Before he sent us away, Inquisitor Voss gave me a data crystal and whispered that if anything happened to him, I should find the Lion of Gathalammer. I didn't understand until later when I accessed the crystal. It contained a file about you, including protocols for establishing emergency contact." Havelock felt a mixture of pride and sorrow at Voss's foresight. The Lion of Gathalammer was an old code name from a campaign they had fought together decades ago, long before Voss became his protege. "Do you still have the original data crystal that you took from the Cardinal's estate?" Havelock asked. Ilara reached into her coveralls and produced a small, unremarkable crystal, handing it to him. "I memorized what I could, but there's much more there. Names, dates, coordinates." Havelock pocketed the crystal. "You've shown remarkable courage, Sister Ilara. Now I need to get you to safety before." A metallic clang from the corridor outside silenced him. Havelock drew his bolt pistol, disguised as a standard-issue Administratum defense laser. "Behind me," he ordered quietly, moving toward the door. The corridor outside was dimly lit, emergency lumens casting long shadows. The maintenance bay had only one entrance, a tactical disadvantage Havelock now regretted. The shuffling, mechanical sounds of a servitor echoed down the corridor, the same one that had been tracking him earlier, he suspected. But servitors didn't hunt alone. "Is there another way out?" he asked Alara. She pointed to a maintenance hatch in the ceiling. "It leads to a ventilation shaft. I checked it when I arrived. It's big enough to crawl through." "Go," Havelock ordered. "Head for docking bay Epsilon 9. My shuttle is there. The pilot's name is Caius. Tell him Throne's shadow falls eastward. He'll know I sent you." "What about you?" Alara asked, already moving toward the hatch. "I'll be right behind you after I deal with our mechanical friend." Havelock positioned himself behind a stack of maintenance crates, his bolt pistol aimed at the doorway. The servitor appeared in the entrance, its augmetic components whirring. Behind it came two figures in the crimson armor of Axelrod's specialists. Their helmets concealed their faces, but their movements were too fluid, too predatory to be fully human. "Acolyte of the Corpse God," one of them called out, its voice carrying the same unnatural resonance Voss had described in his final report. "Come out and face the inevitable." Havelock responded with a burst from his bolt pistol, catching the leading specialist in the chest. Unlike a normal human, it didn't fall, instead staggering back slightly before continuing forward. "Inquisitor Lord Maximilian Havelock," the second specialist said, its voice a sibilant hiss. "The Cardinal was most displeased with your pupil's interference. He will be delighted to add you to his collection." Havelock triggered a photon flash grenade, momentarily blinding the demonically possessed troops. In that instant of confusion, he sprinted across the bay, firing precisely at the ceiling joist, supporting a large section of ventilation ducting. The metal groaned and collapsed, crushing the servitor and temporarily blocking the doorway. With seconds to spare, Havelock reached the maintenance hatch and pulled himself up into the ventilation system. He could hear the possessed specialists already moving the debris there, inhuman strength making short work of obstacles that would have stopped normal troops. The ventilation shaft was cramped even for Havelock's average frame. He crawled quickly, following the route Alara had taken toward the docking bays. Behind him, he could hear the sounds of pursuit, metal being torn aside as the creatures forced their way into the shaft. Ahead, the shaft branched in 3 directions. There was no sign of which way Alara had gone, but a faint airflow from the right passage suggested it led toward the outer ring where the docking bays were located. Havelock took the right branch, moving as quietly as possible while maintaining speed. After 50 meters, the shaft opened into a wider air circulation chamber. As he climbed down into it, a whisper from the shadows caught his attention. "Inquisitor." Alara emerged from behind a ventilation fan, her face pale with fear. "They're ahead of us too. I saw more of those crimson soldiers checking each docking bay. They've anticipated our escape route," Havelock concluded grimly. "We need an alternative." He considered their options. A frontal approach to the docking bay would be suicide. Even his authority as an Inquisitor Lord might not help if the station's security forces had been compromised. "There's a cargo loading area 3 levels down," Alara suggested. "Less secure than the passenger docks. We might find a transport there." Havelock nodded. "Lead the way." They navigated through a labyrinth of maintenance passages and service corridors, avoiding the main thoroughfares where they might be spotted. Twice they had to backtrack to avoid security patrols. "They've locked down the station," Havelock observed as they watched a squad of security officers checking identification at a junction. "Our presence hasn't gone unnoticed." "How could they have known you would come here?" Alara asked. "They didn't," Havelock replied grimly. "They were waiting for anyone from the Inquisition to follow Voss's trail, which means they know exactly what he discovered." They eventually reached the cargo loading area, a vast, chaotic space filled with shipping, containers, loading servitors, and cargo vessels of varying sizes. The security presence was minimal, focused more on preventing theft than controlling access. There, Havelock pointed to a small, nondescript cargo shuttle being loaded with supply crates, bound for the planet below. Civilian registry, minimal crew, our best option. They moved carefully through the loading area, using the containers for cover. As they approached the shuttle, Havelock noticed its pilot, a heavy-set woman in a standard Merchant Guild uniform, arguing with a loading servitor about manifest discrepancies. "Wait here," he instructed Alara, then approached the pilot with the confident stride of an administratum official. "Captain," he addressed her formally, flashing a forged administratum credential. "There seems to be a discrepancy with your tariff documentation." The pilot sighed wearily. "First the manifest, now the tariffs. Emperor's teeth, the bureaucracy on this station gets worse every month." "Indeed," Havelock agreed sympathetically. "Perhaps we could discuss this aboard your vessel. I have the necessary forms there." The pilot gave him a suspicious look but then shrugged resignedly. "Fine, let's get this sorted quickly. I've got a schedule to keep." Once they were inside the shuttle's small cabin, Havelock dropped the pretense. He drew his bolt pistol and aimed it at the startled pilot. "What in the warp?" she began. "Captain, I apologize for the deception, but this is an emergency requisition," Havelock stated, showing his inquisitorial rosette. "By the authority of the God Emperor and the Holy Ordos, I am commandeering this vessel." The pilot's eyes widened at the sight of the rosette. "Throne and Inquisitor, what's happening?" "Nothing that concerns you if you cooperate," Havelock replied. "I need this shuttle immediately. You and your crew will disembark." "I don't have a crew, just me," the pilot said. "And I can't just abandon my cargo. The Guild will." "The Guild will be compensated," Havelock interrupted. "Your life, however, is non-negotiable. Disembark now." After a moment's hesitation, the pilot nodded. "The pre-flight sequence is already complete. She's fueled and ready to go." "Good, now go." As the pilot hurried down the boarding ramp, Havelock signaled to Alara, who quickly joined him. Aboard the shuttle, he sealed the hatch behind her and moved to the cockpit. "Can you pilot this vessel?" Alara asked anxiously. "I've flown worse," Havelock replied, settling into the pilot's seat and familiarizing himself with the controls. They were standard Imperial design, albeit somewhat outdated. He activated the engines, which rumbled to life with a reassuring vibration. The shuttle's machine spirit seemed cooperative, accepting his commands without the resistance sometimes shown to unfamiliar pilots. As he guided the shuttle away from the loading dock, an alarm blared over the station's Vox system. "Attention, all security personnel. Unauthorized departure from Cargo Bay Delta 7. Intercept and detain." "They're quick," Havelock muttered, accelerating toward the bay's atmospheric containment field. The shuttle shuddered as he pushed its engines beyond their usual parameters. Behind them, the cargo bay doors began to close, an automated security response to prevent unauthorized departures. Havelock increased thrust further, racing the closing doors. "Will we make it?" Alara asked, her knuckles white as she gripped the co-pilot's seat. "We'll find out," Havelock replied grimly. The shuttle barely slipped through the narrowing gap, scraping its upper hull against the closing doors with a screech of tortured metal. Then they were free of the station, accelerating into the void, but freedom was brief. The station's defense grid activated, targeting arrays locking onto the fleeing shuttle. "Auto turret lock," Havelock announced, reading the warning runes flashing across the control panel. "Brace yourself." The shuttle lurched violently as the first volley of defense fire grazed its port side. "Warning klaxons." blared through the cabin as systems reported damage. Secondary thrusters damaged, Havelock reported calmly, his hands moving over the controls with practiced efficiency. Main engine still functional. He entered a series of evasive maneuvers, pushing the civilian craft beyond its designed capabilities. The station's targeting systems struggled to predict his erratic course. "Where are we going?" Alara asked, clutching a handhold as the shuttle banked sharply. "Sentinel Prime," Havelock answered. "The nexus of the conspiracy. We need to see what Cardinal Thorn and Lord Commander Axelrod are planning." "But that's," Alara began in horror. "Exactly where they don't expect us to go," Havelock finished for her. "They'll assume we're fleeing to the nearest inquisitorial fortress. By the time they realize our actual destination, we'll be planetside." A second volley from the station's defenses missed them entirely, as Havelock executed a tight, spiral descent toward the gas giant that dominated the system. Its massive gravity well would help accelerate them toward the fourth planet, Sentinel Prime. "We're not out of danger yet," Havelock cautioned as he plotted their course. "This shuttle has minimal void shielding and no weapons. If they dispatch pursuit craft..." As if summoned by his words, the Auspex pinged a warning. Two fast-moving signatures had detached from the station and were accelerating toward them. "Interceptors," Havelock confirmed, studying the readings. "Naval pattern, faster and better armed than this cargo hauler." "Can we outrun them?" Alara asked. "No, but we might outsmart them." Havelock drove the shuttle deeper into the gas giant's outer atmosphere. The vessel shuddered as turbulence buffeted it, warning runes flashing as the hull temperature rose. "The atmospheric interference will confuse their auger arrays," he explained, his eyes fixed on the temperature gauges that climbed steadily toward the red. "And may the Emperor forgive me for what I'm about to do to this machine spirit." He activated the shuttle's emergency transponder, a device designed to broadcast distress signals in case of accidents. But instead of the standard Imperial distress code, Havelock input a specific sequence of pulses. "What are you doing?" Alara asked. "Creating a diversion," Havelock replied. "That signal mimics the emergency transponder of an inquisitorial fast courier. Our pursuers will believe there are two vessels, us and an Inquisition ship." True to his prediction, one of the interceptors altered course, pursuing the false signal deeper into the gas giant's atmosphere. The other, however, maintained its pursuit of their actual position. "One down, one to go," Havelock muttered. He banked the shuttle hard, skimming the upper atmosphere of the gas giant to build velocity, before breaking free of its gravity well and setting course for Sentinel Prime. The remaining interceptor adjusted its vector, still in pursuit but now at a greater distance. "It's still following us," Alara observed anxiously. "Yes, but now it's alone and we've gained some time." Havelock studied the navigational display. "We'll reach Sentinel Prime's outer atmosphere in approximately 47 minutes. Too long for comfort, too short for our pursuer to call for reinforcements." He turned to face Alara directly, for the first time since their desperate flight began. "Now, sister, Alara, while we have this moment, tell me everything you know about Cardinal Thorn's plans for the Ascension on Sentinel Prime." Chapter IV, The Primary Nexus. Sentinel Prime, fourth planet of the Helix Secundus system, hung in the void like a rusted iron orb. Once a thriving Imperial world, its surface was now dominated by vast military installations and manufacturing complexes dedicated to supporting the 84th Ophidian Regiment. Civilian populations were concentrated in enormous hive cities that punctuated the otherwise industrial landscape. From orbit, the planet appeared ordinary, another cog in the vast machine of the Imperium's military complex. But as Havelock piloted their damaged shuttle through the upper atmosphere, he could sense something wrong. His decades of experience hunting the taint of chaos had attuned him to subtle signs that would escape most observers. The atmospheric distortion patterns are unusual, he noted, studying the navigational cogitators. There's a high concentration of psychoreactive particles in the mesosphere. Is that natural? Alara asked, peering over his shoulder at the readouts. No, it suggests large-scale psychic activity or rituals on the surface. Havelock frowned at the implication, the kind that thinned the barrier between real space and the warp. Their shuttle continued its descent, shuddering occasionally as damaged systems struggled to maintain optimal function. The interceptor that had pursued them from the station had finally broken off when they entered Sentinel Prime's atmosphere, seemingly unwilling to follow them to the planet's surface. That too was concerning. If the conspirators controlled this world as thoroughly as Havelock suspected, why not shoot them down or capture them upon landing? They want us here, he realized aloud. They're confident whatever we discover won't matter, because we won't leave alive. Or because it's too late to stop what's happening, Alara suggested quietly. Havelock nodded grimly. Possibly both. He adjusted their course away from the main starports and military bases, aiming instead for a remote area of wilderness between two major installations. The shuttle's auspex indicated minimal surveillance in the region, a surprising oversight in a military-controlled world. As they descended below the cloud layer, the landscape revealed itself as a blasted wasteland. What should have been forested highlands was now a blackened expanse of charred earth and twisted dead trees. This was deliberately burned, Havelock observed. Recently, too. No more than a month ago, judging by the lack of regrowth. He guided the shuttle toward a narrow canyon that would provide some cover from orbital surveillance. The landing was rough. The damaged maneuvering thrusters gave out in the final approach, forcing Havelock to compensate with main engines alone. They hit the ground hard, skidding several hundred meters before coming to rest against the canyon wall. Emperor's mercy, Alara gasped, recovering from the impact. Are we still in one piece? The shuttle isn't, Havelock replied, surveying the damage reports flashing across the cockpit. Displays. Main engines are offline. We won't be using this for extraction. He rose from the pilot's seat and moved to a storage locker near the rear of the cabin. Inside was a standard survival kit for civilian cargo pilots, basic medical supplies, ration packs, and a compact Voxgaster. Havelock appropriated these, along with a weatherproof cloak that would help conceal his administratum uniform. Take this, he said, handing a second cloak to Alara. And this, he passed her a las pistol from his own concealed holster. Do you know how to use it? She nodded. The Skalam orphanage included basic weapons training. They prepared us for potential military or enforcer service. Good. Havelock was increasingly impressed with the young woman's practical education. Stay close and follow my lead. Our priority is intelligence gathering. We need to confirm what's happening here before attempting to contact off-world inquisitorial forces. They exited the shuttle through the emergency hatch, emerging into the eerie silence of the burned forest. The air tasted acrid, with an underlying metallic tang that Havelock recognized from previous encounters with warp phenomena. Which way? Alara asked, her voice hushed. Havelock consulted a compact auspex unit from his belt. There's a significant power signature. 8 kilometers to the northeast. That's our best lead. They set out through the devastated landscape, moving carefully to avoid leaving obvious tracks. As they hiked, Havelock noticed strange formations in the burned ground, patterns that seemed almost deliberate, as if the fires had been controlled to create specific designs visible only from above. After 2 hours of cautious progress, they crested a ridge that offered their first view of what lay beyond the burned zone. Below them, in a vast circular valley, stood what appeared to be a massive construction project. Towering structures of black stone rose from the earth in concentric rings, surrounding a central platform elevated 100 meters above the ground. Thousands of figures moved across the site like ants, some in the uniforms of the 84th Ophidian, others in the robes of ecclesiarchal servants, and still others in the red hooded garments of unidentified cultists. Throne of Terra, Alara whispered. What are they building? Not building, Havelock corrected grimly. Excavating. Those structures are ancient Xenos in origin, if I'm not mistaken. He adjusted his augmetic eye for maximum magnification, studying the central platform. At its center stood a massive device, part mechanical, part organic in appearance. Its surface writhed, with iridescent energy that hurt the eye to observe directly. A warp gate, Havelock identified the abomination, heavily modified with Imperial and Xenos technology. Cardinal Thorn isn't just planning to summon demons, he's attempting to create a permanent passage between real space and the warp. The Ascension, Alara realized. They're planning to turn this entire planet into a gateway for chaos. Forces. Worse, Havelock said, his voice hardening. If they succeed, the psychic backlash could create a warp storm that would engulf the entire sector. Billions would die, and countless worlds would be exposed to demonic incursion. He continued studying the site, noting details that confirmed his worst fears. Around the perimeter of the excavation, massive void shields had been established, not to keep intruders out but to contain the energies being summoned within. Mechanicus priests moved among the machinery, their crimson robes marked with the blue mechadendrites that Sister Alara had described from the Cardinal's coded journal. We need to get closer, Havelock decided. I need to confirm whether the ritual has begun, or if there's still time to stop it. How? There are thousands of troops down there. Havelock pointed to a convoy of supply vehicles approaching the site from the east. We'll hitch a ride. They made their way down the ridge, using the burned tree stumps for cover as they approached the rough road that led to the excavation site. The convoy, a line of 6 heavy cargo 8s escorted by Chimera armored transports, moved slowly due to the rough terrain. Timing their approach carefully, Havelock and Alara dashed from cover as the last cargo 8 passed. With practiced efficiency, Havelock opened the rear access panel that led to the engine compartment, a standard design feature of Imperial heavy transports, intended to allow maintenance on the move during military operations. The space was cramped and stiflingly hot, filled with the rumble of the massive Prometheum engines. They wedged themselves among the machinery, careful to avoid the moving parts that could easily crush them. How did you know this would be here? Alara whispered, barely audible over the engine noise. Standard STC pattern, Havelock replied. Some knowledge is worth retaining across decades of service. The convoy continued for nearly an hour before slowing as it approached the outer security perimeter of the excavation site. Through gaps in the engine compartment, Havelock could see armed guards inspecting each vehicle. However, their focus was primarily on the cargo holds rather than the engine compartments. Once through the checkpoint, the convoy separated, each vehicle heading to different areas of the massive site. Their cargo 8 rumbled toward the eastern quadrant, eventually stopping near a cluster of prefabricated buildings that appeared to serve as command posts. Now comes the difficult part, Havelock murmured. We need to move from here to someplace where we can observe the central platform more closely. They waited until the cargo was being unloaded, using the commotion to slip from the engine compartment. Moving between vehicles and supply crates, they made their way toward one of the prefabricated structures bearing Mechanicus insignia. A cogitator node, Havelock identified it. If we can access their data network, We might learn the specifics of their plan. Using his inquisitorial training, Havelock bypassed the simple lock on the structure's rear entrance. Inside, banks of humming cogitators filled the small space. A single tech priest sat at a monitoring station, his back to the door as he communed with the machine spirits through a direct neural interface. Havelock moved silently across the metal floor, drawing his bolt pistol. Before the tech priest could react, Havelock pressed the weapon against the base of the man's skull. "Make a sound and you'll meet the Omnissiah sooner than planned," he whispered. The tech priest froze, his augmetic components whirring in surprise. His mechadendrites standard. Red, Havelock noted, not the azure of the corrupted Mechanicus faction, twitched involuntarily. "You are interfering with sanctioned Mechanicus operations," the tech priest intoned, his voice mechanical monotone. "Identify yourself." "Inquisitor Lord Maximilian Havelock, Ordo Hereticus," Havelock replied. "And you, priest, are involved in heretical activities that violate your oaths to both the Emperor and the Omnissiah." The tech priest's organic eye widened slightly, the closest thing to an emotional response his heavily augmented body could manage. "I serve only the Omnissiah's will, Inquisitor. My assignment here came directly from Magos Dominus Vex. And does Magos Vexes will include collaborating with Xenotech and warp entities?" Havelock gestured toward the screens displaying the excavation site. A slight tremor ran through the tech priest's frame. "I monitor power distribution systems only. My access to project specifics is limited by protocol. But you have eyes, unless you've replaced those as well," Havelock pressed. "You've seen what they're unearthing. You know it violates the most fundamental teachings of the cult Mechanicus." The tech priest was silent for a moment, internal calculations almost visible behind his remaining human features. "There have been concerning deviations from standard protocol," he admitted. "Finally, the Blue Mechadendrite faction overrides standard safety procedures. They integrate components without proper ritual cleansing or verification." "And you've said nothing?" Ilara asked from her position by the door. "To whom would I report such concerns?" the tech priest replied. "Magos Vex leads the Mechadendrite faction. Those who questioned their methods suffered unfortunate accidents or were transferred to distant outposts." Havelock considered the tech priest carefully. Fear was evident beneath his mechanized exterior. Not just fear of Havelock's bolt pistol, but a deeper dread of what was happening at the excavation site. "What's your name, priest?" Havelock asked, slightly relaxing his grip on the weapon. "Adept Xeris, beta-level engine seer, seconded to Explorator Fleet Gamma 19. Adept Xeris, the Emperor and the Omnissiah now require your service," Havelock said solemnly. "I need access to the site schematics and any data regarding the central device." Xeris hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I will comply, Inquisitor, but be warned access to sensitive data will trigger security protocols. We have minutes at most before the system registers unauthorized queries. Then work quickly," Havelock instructed, lowering his weapon completely. Xeris turned to his cogitator array, mechadendrites connecting to multiple interface ports. Simultaneously, data began scrolling across the screens at a speed too rapid for human eyes to follow, but Havelock's augmetic eye captured and processed the information. "There," Xeris indicated as a schematic appeared on the central screen. "The excavation site. Structure predates Imperial settlement of this world by approximately 15,000 years, according to carbon dating." "Necron," Havelock suggested, studying the geometric precision of the concentric rings. "Negative. The material composition is inconsistent with Necron architecture. Preliminary analysis suggests Eldari origin, specifically from their pre-fall civilization." "That was unexpected. The Eldari built a warp gate here." "Why? Not a gate as such," Zaris clarified, bringing up additional data. According to the excavation team's findings, it was originally designed as a containment and observation facility, a means to study warp phenomena safely. And Cardinal Thorn is repurposing it, Havelock concluded grimly, using the containment technology in reverse to create a passage. Correct. Zaris's mechadendrites moved rapidly between interfaces. The modified device they've installed at the center, designated the Oculus in these files, combines Eldari crystals with Imperial technology and components of unknown origin. When will it be activated? Alara asked anxiously. Zaris accessed another data stream. According to the operational schedule, Emperor Protect Us, the primary activation sequence is already underway. Final convergence is scheduled for 1900 hours today. Havelock checked his chronometer. That's less than 4 hours from now. The process cannot be easily halted once begun, Zaris added. The energy buildup is self-sustaining after the secondary harmonic threshold is achieved, which has already happened, Havelock guessed, noting the power fluctuation charts on one of the screens. Affirmative, approximately 6 hours ago. Havelock processed this information rapidly. Where are Cardinal Thorn and Lord Commander Axelrod now? Zaris accessed the security systems. Cardinal Thorn is at the central platform, overseeing the final rituals. Lord Commander Axelrod is in the Eastern Command Bunker, coordinating security and the highest concentration of troops. The perimeter is heavily guarded, but the inner rings around the central platform are sparsely defended. Access is restricted to those with specific genetic markers or warding talismans. Genetic markers, Alara asked. Those chosen by the Cardinal for ascension, Zaris explained. They've been subjected to genetic manipulation and psychic conditioning over the past year. Havelock's expression hardened. How many civilian populations are in the immediate blast radius? If the device fully activates, Zaris's organic components visibly paled. Approximately 4.8 billion souls across 3 major hive clusters. And beyond that, models predict a cascading warp rift that could engulf the entire sector within solar days. The resulting warp storm would rival the Eye of Terror in scale, though it would take decades to fully stabilize. The implications were staggering. Not just a demonic incursion, but the birth of an entirely new warp rift that could eventually swallow hundreds of worlds. We need to stop the activation, Havelock stated, his voice calm despite the apocalyptic scenario unfolding before them. Are there weakness points in the device or the power systems supporting it? The power relays here, and here. Zaris indicated points on the schematic. Disrupting all 3 simultaneously would cause a feedback surge that might destabilize the activation sequence. Might. 86.4% probability, according to my calculations. However, each relay is heavily guarded and equipped with redundant systems. Simultaneous sabotage would require a coordinated team, which we don't have, Havelock observed grimly. Is there a central weakness? Something 1 or 2 operatives could target? Zaris considered for a moment his augmetic brain processing possibilities. The Oculus itself, it contains a regulator crystal, Eldari in origin, that moderates the warp energy flow. Destroying it would cause a catastrophic but contained implosion of the device. Contained, Alara questioned. The energy would collapse inward rather than expanding outward. The resulting damage would be limited to approximately 1 kilometer radius from the central platform, and anyone within that radius would be instantly obliterated, Zaris confirmed dispassionately. Along with the Oculus itself. A suicide mission then. Havelock filed this information away without comment. How would one destroy this crystal? It's resistant to conventional weapons, but a focused melta charge applied directly to the crystals. Matrix would shatter it irreparably. Havelock nodded. I'll need schematics of the central platform, guard rotations, and any information on the Cardinal's personal security detail. As Xeris compiled this data, alarm runes suddenly flashed across his cogitator array. Security. Protocols have detected unauthorized access. We have less than 2 minutes before a response. Team arrives. Download everything to this, Havelock ordered, producing a small data slate from his coat. Then, wipe the access logs if possible. While Xeris worked frantically to transfer the data, Havelock turned to Alara. You need to leave this planet immediately. The data we've gathered must reach inquisitorial authorities. But how? Our shuttle is damaged beyond repair. Adept Xeris will help you, Havelock said, turning to the tech priest. There must be supply. Vessels, courier ships, something that could get her off-world. Xeris nodded reluctantly. The Mechanicus maintains a separate landing field on the western perimeter. Small tech servitor transports arrive daily with specialized components. Security is minimal as they're considered internal Mechanicus assets. Can you get her aboard one? Possibly. My credentials would grant access, though diverting a transport would eventually be noticed. Eventually is better than immediately, Havelock said. The data transfer completed with a soft chime. Alara, your mission is to get this information to Inquisitor Lord Castellan at the fortress monastery on Helios Secundus. He commands sufficient forces to quarantine this system if necessary. What about you? Alara asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. I'll deal with the Oculus, Havelock replied simply. That's a suicide mission, she protested. The Emperor asks all of us to serve in different ways, Havelock said calmly. Some are called to bear witness, others to act. This is my duty as an Inquisitor Lord, to face the darkness so that others might survive to fight another day. Alarms began blaring throughout the compound before Alara could respond. Xeris disconnected from the cogitator network. They've pinpointed the security breach, he reported. We have perhaps 60 seconds before security forces arrive. Then we move now, Havelock decided. Xeris, get Sister Alara to the Mechanicus landing field. Use whatever cover story is necessary. And you, my lord? Alara asked as Havelock checked his weapons. I'll create a diversion, he said grimly, then make my way to the central platform. Before they parted, Havelock pressed his inquisitorial rosette into Alara's hand. Show this to Inquisitor Lord Castellan. Tell him the Lion of Gathalammer has roared his last. Alara's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but she nodded resolutely. The Emperor protects, my lord. The Emperor protects, Havelock affirmed. Now go. As Xeris led Alara through a maintenance accessway at the rear of the structure, Havelock moved to the main entrance. He could hear the approaching footsteps of the security team, at least 6 sets of boots, moving with military precision. Havelock waited until they were almost at the door, then fired his bolt pistol directly into the main power conduit beside the entrance. The resulting explosion plunged the entire sector into darkness, as emergency backup systems struggled to engage. In the confusion, Havelock slipped out through the billowing smoke, moving swiftly toward his ultimate destination, the heart of Cardinal Thorn's heresy. Chapter V, The Oculus. As warning klaxons blared across the excavation site, Cardinal Aurelius Thorn stood serenely on the central platform, gazing up at the massive device that would be his crowning achievement. The Oculus pulsed with eldritch energies, its crystalline components refracting impossible colors that hurt the human eye to observe directly. Is there a problem, Cardinal? A voice like grinding metal asked from behind him. Thorn turned to face the speaker, a figure in crimson Mechanicus robes, its face a nightmarish fusion of human and machine, with blue mechadendrites writhing around its form like agitated serpents. "Nothing that concerns us, Magos Vex," Thorn replied smoothly. "A minor security breach in the Eastern Quadrant. Lord Commander Axelrod's forces will handle it." "Time grows short," Vex observed, his voice distorting through corrupted vox emitters. "The alignment occurs in less than 3 hours. Any disruption now could jeopardize years of preparation." "Have faith, my friend," Thorn smiled, placing a hand on the Magos' shoulder. Beneath the Cardinal's fingers, the Magos' robes writhed as if alive. "The architect of fate has shown us the path. All proceeds according to his design." Vex's mechanical eyes whirred as they focused on the Cardinal's face. "Your confidence borders on hubris, Cardinal. The changer of ways rewards success, not blind faith." "And success we shall have," Thorn assured him. "The positioning is perfect. The vessels are prepared." He gestured to the dozens of robed figures arranged in concentric circles around the oculus, each standing perfectly still in attitudes of prayer. "When the barrier thins, our Lord's blessing will flow through the oculus and into his chosen vessels. The ascension will proceed as foretold." The Magos seemed unconvinced. "The intruder concerns me. The timing is suspicious." "A minor irritant," Thorn dismissed the concern. "Though if it would ease your mind, perhaps you should oversee the security response personally. Lord Commander Axelrod would benefit from your unique perspective." Vex considered this suggestion, his blue mechadendrites twitching with agitation. "Very well, but the rituals must continue uninterrupted. The harmonic resonance cannot be allowed to destabilize." "Of course," Thorn agreed. "I shall personally oversee the preparations here." As the corrupted Magos descended from the central platform, Thorn allowed his serene mask to slip slightly. The security breach was indeed concerning, especially given the reports of an inquisitorial presence on Sentinel Prime. His allies within the station had confirmed that Inquisitor Lord Havelock had escaped their trap, and the tracking devices on their interceptors suggested he had come to this very planet. An Inquisitor Lord was a far more dangerous adversary than Thorn's previous inquisitorial problem. Voss had been skilled but inexperienced, easily outmaneuvered through political channels. Havelock was a veteran with decades of experience hunting heretics. His presence here was problematic. Still, it changed nothing. The oculus was already active, the ritual underway. Even if Havelock somehow penetrated the inner sanctum, he could not stop what was coming. The power of an ascendant demon prince of Tzinch would prove more than sufficient to deal with one aging Inquisitor. Thorn touched the 8-pointed star tattooed over his heart, hidden beneath his ornate robes. Soon, very soon, the physical limitations of his mortal form would be shed, and he would be reborn as something far greater. Havelock moved through the shadows of the vast excavation site, using the chaos caused by his diversion to slip past security checkpoints. The data from Adept Xeris had provided a detailed map of patrol routes and blind spots in the security coverage. Even with the heightened alert status, the sheer size of the operation made it impossible to cover every approach. The central platform loomed above him, a tower of black stone rising from the center of the excavation like a massive sundial. Unlike the military efficiency of the outer perimeter, the inner rings surrounding the platform had an altogether different character. Robed figures moved in strange, synchronized patterns, their voices raised in chants that made Havelock's skin crawl. The air itself seemed to shimmer with unnatural energies, and strange symbols had been carved into the ground, forming intricate patterns that hurt the eye to follow. Ritual boundaries, Havelock recognized, designed to channel and focus psychic energies. According to Xeris's data, The innermost ring could only be crossed by those bearing specific genetic markers or warding talismans. Havelock had neither, but he did have decades of experience circumventing such protections. From his coat, he produced a small silver cylinder, a gift from a radical Ordo Xenos Inquisitor he had worked with years ago. The device contained a substance derived from HRUD technology, capable of temporarily shifting the user slightly out of phase with normal space-time. Its use was technically heretical, but Havelock had long ago learned that fighting the enemies of mankind sometimes required pragmatic compromises. He activated the device and felt the unsettling sensation of partial displacement wash over him. The world took on a grayish hue and sounds became muffled. He had approximately 3 minutes before the effect wore off. Moving quickly but carefully, Havelock crossed the ritual boundaries. The wards flared briefly as he passed, sensing something but unable to fully detect his phase-shifted form. Cultists nearby paused in their chanting, heads turning to search for the source of the disturbance, but Havelock had already moved beyond them. He reached the base of the central platform as the phase shift began to wear off. A spiral staircase of black stone wound around the tower's exterior, guarded at regular intervals by pairs of crimson armored soldiers, Axelrod's elite troops, likely demon-possessed like those Voss had encountered. Avoiding the stairs, Havelock located a maintenance accessway marked on Xeris's schematics. Narrow shaft used by tech priests to access the power conduits that ran up the platform's core. The entrance was concealed behind a panel decorated with Mechanicus symbols, locked with a simple binary code that Havelock easily bypassed. The shaft was cramped and dark, barely wide enough for Havelock to ascend using the metal rungs embedded in its walls. The air grew increasingly hot and charged with static electricity as he climbed. Occasionally, the entire structure would shudder slightly, and pulses of blue-violet light would race up the conduits that lined the shaft. After what seemed like an eternity of climbing, Havelock reached a junction where the shaft opened onto a narrow circular walkway that ringed the interior of the platform's upper level. Through graded sections in the floor, he could see the massive chamber below where the oculus pulsed with malevolent energy. The chamber was filled with robed figures arranged in perfect circles, each standing perfectly still in poses of supplication. At the center, elevated on a dais directly beneath the oculus, stood a solitary figure in ornate crimson and gold vestments, Cardinal Thorn himself, arms outstretched as if embracing the abomination above him. Havelock studied the oculus carefully. The device was a complex fusion of technologies, the elegant curves of Eldari design, providing the framework for a chaotic assemblage of Imperial machinery and unknown, organic-looking components that pulsed and shifted unnaturally. At its heart, suspended in a field of crackling energy, was a crystal approximately the size of a human head. Unlike the corrupted components surrounding it, the crystal appeared pure, its facets catching and refracting light with mathematical precision. The regulator crystal, Havelock recognized from Xeris's description, the key to the entire device. He checked the small melt-a-charge he had assembled from components in his hidden equipment pouch. It was a crude device by inquisitorial standards, but it would serve its purpose. The challenge would be getting close enough to place it directly on the crystal's housing without being detected. A door at the far side of the circular walkway opened, and Havelock pressed himself into the shadows of a support column. 2 tech priests entered, their mechadendrites the telltale azure of the corrupted Mechanicus faction. They moved to a control panel and began adjusting settings, conversing in binary code that Havelock's augmetic ear translated automatically. The harmonic resonance is fluctuating beyond acceptable parameters, one said. The vessels in Section Gamma 9 report accelerated mutation. Increase stabilizer output to compensate, the other replied. The Cardinal insists the transformation proceed on schedule, regardless of casualties among the lower vessels. The loss rate is higher than projected. We may not have sufficient vessels to contain the initial warp bleed-through. Irrelevant. Once the primary vessel ascends, additional hosts will be readily available from the planet's population. The implications were grim. The vessels they spoke of were clearly human hosts being prepared for demonic possession on a massive scale. When the Oculus fully activated, it would allow demons to pour through into real space, with prepared hosts waiting to receive them. And the primary vessel, that could only be Cardinal Thorn himself, preparing to become a demon prince through direct communion with his chaos patron. The tech priests finished their adjustments and left through the same door, leaving Havelock alone. Once more, he checked his chronometer. Less than 2 hours remained until the predicted time of the ascension. He needed to act soon, but rushing would only lead to failure. Carefully, he made his way around the circular walkway to the control panel the tech priests had been using. The runes and symbols covering its surface were a blasphemous mixture of Mechanicus, script and corrupted variants that hurt the eye to observe directly. Still, Havelock's decades of experience allowed him to decipher enough to understand the basic functions. The panel controlled power distribution to the stabilizer fields containing the Oculus's energies. If he could disrupt those fields temporarily, it might create enough confusion for him to approach the regulator crystal undetected. Havelock made subtle adjustments to the stabilizer outputs, introducing a pattern that would cause gradual, escalating fluctuations in the containment field. It would take several minutes for the changes to become noticeable, giving him time to position himself for the final approach. He had just finished when a voice spoke directly behind him. "I wondered when you would finally make your presence known, Inquisitor." Havelock turned slowly to find himself facing Cardinal Thorn. The Cardinal looked much as he had during their confrontation at his estate, except for his eyes. Once brown, they now shimmered with an unnatural blue luminescence. "Cardinal," Havelock acknowledged calmly, his hand sliding imperceptibly toward his bolt pistol. "Lore, should I address whatever entity now shares his flesh?" Thorn smiled, the expression unnaturally wide. "Still myself, Inquisitor, enhanced perhaps, enlightened certainly, but the Architect of Fate prefers his chosen vessels to maintain their identity, at least until the final transformation. It makes the victory all the sweeter when it is embraced willingly." "You've betrayed everything you once claimed to serve," Havelock observed. "The Emperor, the Imperium, humanity itself." "Betrayed?" Thorn laughed softly. "No, Inquisitor, I've transcended the limitations of a crumbling Imperium built on lies. The corpse you call Emperor has failed humanity. The Architect of Fate offers a path to genuine ascension for me, and for those worthy to follow. Through demonic possession and wholesale slaughter," Havelock countered. "I've seen your plans, Cardinal. The Oculus won't just transform you. It will create a warp rift that will consume this entire sector." "A necessary cleansing," Thorn acknowledged with a dismissive wave of his hand. "The Architect's design requires space in which to flourish. Those who survive will form the foundation of a new order." As they spoke, Havelock noted subtle changes occurring in the chamber below. The fluctuations he had programmed into the stabilizer fields were beginning to manifest, ripples of distortion, spreading through the energy field surrounding the Oculus. Some of the cultists in the innermost circle had broken their poses, looking around in confusion. "And your allies?" Havelock pressed, keeping Thorn's attention focused on him rather than the growing disruption. "Lord Commander Axelrod, the corrupted Mechanicus faction, do they Understand they're merely sacrifices to your ambition. A flicker of annoyance crossed Thorn's face. They serve according to their capacity to understand. Axelrod believes he will rule this sector as the Architect's military commander. Magos vex in visions, unlocking technological wonders that the narrow-minded Mechanicus orthodoxy forbids. Their delusions are useful, while you alone will ascend to demonhood, Havelock concluded. The Architect rewards vision, Inquisitor. Mine extends beyond this paltry realm to the infinite possibilities of the warp itself. Below them, the disruption had grown more pronounced. The oculus was pulsing erratically, its energies flaring in uncontrolled bursts. Cultists were breaking formation, some clutching their heads, in pain as the unstable warp energies affected their minds. Thorn finally noticed the disturbance, his unnatural eyes narrowing. "What have you done?" he hissed, his veneer of civility cracking. Havelock used the moment to draw his bolt pistol, aiming it directly at the Cardinal's head. "Created an opportunity, Cardinal. Your ritual is collapsing." "A minor setback," Thorn snarled, his form beginning to shimmer with the same blue-violet energy that surrounded the oculus. "The sequence has progressed too far to be halted completely, and you, Inquisitor, will not leave this place alive." The Cardinal raised his hand, and a pulse of psychic force slammed into Havelock, throwing him against the control panel with bone-crushing force. His bolt pistol went flying, clattering across the walkway and falling through the grating to the chamber below. Havelock struggled to his feet, pain lancing through his body. Several ribs were broken, and he could taste blood. The Cardinal advanced on him, no longer fully human, his form stretched and distorted, fingers elongating into talons, skin taking on an iridescent quality that shifted between human flesh and something crystalline. "Your interference is futile," Thorn said, his voice now layered with inhuman harmonics. "Ascension approaches. Even now the barrier thins. My lord reaches forth to claim his vessel." The air around them rippled as reality itself began to fray. Through gaps in the thinning veil, between dimensions, Havelock caught glimpses of something vast and horrifying, a presence of such alien intellect and malevolence that his mind recoiled from its implications. Tzink, the changer of ways, turning its unfathomable attention toward this pivotal moment. Havelock knew he couldn't defeat the partially ascended Cardinal in direct combat. His only chance, humanity's only chance, lay with the regulator crystal at the heart of the oculus. He needed to get closer, to place the melta-charge where it would do the most damage. As Thorn prepared to strike again, the entire platform shuddered violently. Below the oculus's energy field had become wildly unstable, lashing out with tendrils of warp energy that struck cultists at random, transforming them into hideous, screaming abominations, or reducing them to lash. The momentary distraction gave Havelock his opportunity. He charged, not at Thorn, but at the railing separating the walkway from the open chamber below. Without hesitation, he vaulted over it, plummeting toward the heart of the oculus. "No!" Thorn's scream followed him as Havelock fell, the melta-charge clutched tightly in his hand. Time seemed to slow as Havelock descended through the chaotic energies surrounding the oculus. Pain lanced through every cell of his body as warp energies tried to transform him, to break him down and rebuild him according to the changer's whims. He held on to his purpose with iron determination, his mind focused on a single prayer. "Emperor, guide my hand." He struck the central housing of the oculus, his fingers scrabbling for purchase on its smooth surface. The regulator crystal pulsed just inches from his face, its perfect geometric structure a stark contrast to the corrupted components surrounding it. With the last of his strength, Havelock slammed the melta-charge against the crystal's housing and activated the detonator. He had 3 seconds before it would explode. Cardinal Thorn appeared at the edge of the platform above, his form now barely recognizable as human, a shifting amalgamation of man, demon, and crystalline matter. "You cannot stop the inevitable, Inquisitor," he roared, his voice shaking the very foundations of the structure. Havelock looked up at the abomination that had once been a servant of the Emperor and smiled through blood-stained teeth. "But I can deny it to you," he replied quietly. The Melta charge detonated with a blinding flash of superheated plasma. The regulator crystal shattered instantly, its perfect structure collapsing as the containment field failed catastrophically. The last thing Inquisitor Lord Maximilian Havelock saw was a wave of pure warp energy rushing inward, collapsing upon itself, as the carefully constructed pathways of the oculus imploded. Cardinal Thorn's scream of rage and despair cut off abruptly, as reality itself seemed to fold inward, condensing into a single point of unbearable brightness, before disappearing entirely. In that final moment, as his consciousness dissolved, Havelock thought he heard the Emperor's voice welcoming him home. Epilogue. 1 month after the destruction of the Oculus, a small, nondescript transport ship approached the Fortress Monastery of the Avenging Sun's Space Marine chapter on Helios Secundus. Its transponder codes identified it as a Mechanicus technical support vessel, but its actual contents were far more valuable. In the chapter master's private sanctum, Sister Alara stood before Inquisitor Lord Castellan and chapter master Tiberius, recounting the events that had led to the destruction of Cardinal Thorn's heretical plot. She had escaped Sentinel Prime aboard a Mechanicus courier, guided by Adept Xeris, just as Havelock had planned. "And you're certain the device was destroyed completely?" Inquisitor Lord Castellan asked, his ancient scarred face grave. "Yes, my lord," Alaric confirmed. "Orbital surveillance shows a perfect circle of destruction 1 kilometer in diameter at the excavation site. Nothing remains, not the platform, not the oculus, not Cardinal Thorn or his followers. A contained implosion, just as the tech priest predicted," Castellan mused. "Inquisitor Lord Havelock made his sacrifice count. What of the wider conspiracy?" Chapter Master Tiberius inquired, his massive ceramite-armored form dominating the chamber. "This blue mechadendrite faction of the Mechanicus. Lord Commander Axelrod. Axelrod was found dead in his command bunker," Castellan reported. "Apparently he took his own life when the ritual failed. As for the corrupted Mechanicus elements, the data sister Ilara brought has enabled us to identify key members. The Mechanicus's own internal security forces have been enthusiastic in their purge of the heretics." "And the 84th Ophidian Regiment?" Ilara asked. "Disbanded," Castellan said grimly. "The troops are being screened individually for chaos taint. Those found clean will be reassigned to other regiments. The rest will face the Emperor's justice." Ilara nodded solemnly. The cost had been high, but the threat had been contained thanks to Inquisitor Voss's initial investigation and Inquisitor Lord Havelock's ultimate sacrifice. "There remains the question of your future, Sister Alara," Castellan continued, turning his penetrating gaze upon her. "You've demonstrated remarkable courage and resourcefulness. The Ordo Hereticus has need of such qualities." "My lord," Ilara asked, uncertain of his meaning. "I'm offering you a place in the Inquisition," Castellan clarified. "As my acolyte initially, with the potential to rise to interrogator and perhaps, eventually, Inquisitor in your own right. Havelock saw potential in you. I trust his judgment even posthumously." Ilara felt a wave of emotions: honor, trepidation, determination. She thought of Inquisitor Voss, his dedication to truth regardless of the cost. Of Inquisitor Lord Havelock, willing to sacrifice everything to protect the Imperium from the darkness that threatened it. "I would be honored to serve, my lord," she said finally, her voice steady despite the weight of the path opening before her. Castellan nodded approvingly. Then kneel, Sister Alara, and receive the symbol of your new office. As Alara knelt on the cold stone floor of the chapter master's sanctum, Inquisitor Lord Castellan placed a silver rosette around her neck, identical to the one Havelock had pressed into her hand. During their final moments together, "Rise, Acolyte Alara of the Ordo Hereticus," Castellan intoned formally. "May the Emperor guide your steps in the darkness, and may you be his light against the shadows that threaten mankind." Alara rose, feeling the weight of the rosette against her chest, a weight that represented duty, sacrifice, and the eternal vigilance required to preserve the Imperium against enemies both without and within. "The Emperor protects," she whispered, echoing the words she had heard from both Voss and Havelock. "The Emperor protects," Castellan and Tiberius responded in unison. Outside the fortress monastery's armored windows, the twin suns of Helios Secundus were setting, casting long shadows across the landscape. A new darkness was falling, but with it came the promise of eventual dawn. In the grim darkness of the far future, there was indeed only war, but while servants of the Emperor stood ready to make the ultimate sacrifice, humanity would endure. The Inquisition would see to it the end